Welcome back to the Better Late Than Never Club. I'm Beck.
And I'm Frost.
And tonight we are watching a Patreon request straight from patron Lindy of the movie The Lovely Bones.
Now, I know nothing about this film. I couldn't even begin to guess. It's got bones in the name, so I assume it's about crime.
I mean, you know, I guess in a roundabout way, yeah.
Crime or horror.
Both
But
true.
Lovely Bones, not really at odds. It's at odds with horror, so I think it's crime.
Right. Well, I know, I guess, a bit too much about this film. Like, is, you know how sometimes you just know kind of the whole plot of a movie, even though you haven't seen it?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with this movie.
Oh, how come?
I think it came out in 2009 and I was too young. I wasn't into horror movies. And this is the genres for this. There's kind of two sets, one from Google, one for Wikipedia.
Yeah.
One says it's a supernatural drama and the other says it's a fantasy horror.
Oh, interesting.
I was a bit too young, wasn't really into horror, anything like that when this came out. But I did hear about it and I think I went through a phase, and I still sometimes do this when I don't think a movie is going to be one I watch. I just look it up and read about it.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like I'm like that with some games. Like not for me, but
I want to know more.
Yeah.
So I have read about this, and it also has a couple of like big name actors in it. So it just sort of.
I couldn't name one.
Well, that's all right. That's what I'm here for.
I don't even know what the poster, the text would look like. That's usually something I can visualize pretty well.
Right. So this one totally just passed you by.
Didn't even know it existed.
Well, I guess you're in for a totally new experience then. So like I said, we have a bit of a mixture of genres here. Supernatural drama or fantasy horror.
Yeah, we just call it all four. Supernatural drama, fantasy, horror.
It is based on a book, a 2002 novel, so a very quick turnaround from novel to movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the Harry Potter kind of book in 2001, movie in 2003.
Was the first book published in 2001?
I think so, or,
Really?
or 1999. I
don't know. So I'm just taking your word as gospel. Either way, this novel was in 2002 and it's of the same name, and it's by a lady called Alice Sebold or Sebold.
No bells being rung.
It is directed by, I actually didn't write down his name, but because I was too distracted by the fact that it's Peter Jackson.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of Lord of the Rings fame.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, he actually doesn't have, I was looking at his filmography, and he doesn't actually have like a super huge filmography in the same way that, say, Steven Spielberg does, who, speaking of Spielberg, he was an executive producer on this film.
Interesting. Gosh, that's interesting.
This film was also, according to Wikipedia, you could put that sentence after everything I say in this preamble, to be honest, but it was an international co-production between the US, the UK, and New Zealand.
I mean, that checks out, being, Peter Jackson's film. He usually uses a lot of New Zealand resources, given that he is,
Kiwi. Yeah.
From New Zealand.
This film came after Lord of the Rings. He did like Lord of the Rings, then Kong, I think. Yep. And then he did this, I think. So that's kind of where it lands. It was, before the Hobbit trilogy.
This really puts it in a weird place, because I sort of was expecting maybe something kind of indie, like why hadn't I heard of this? Right. I assumed it was something fairly small and niche. But yeah, this is big. It's got Spielberg on it. It's got big...
let me give you a reason for why I think you haven't heard of it.
Okay, go.
It didn't do too well.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, so there's a little bit... Because it's also got big names in terms of actors. We've got Saoirse Ronan.
I know that name.
I really hope I'm not butchering her name. I think I'm doing it all right. I think it's like Saoirse. I think it's Saoirse.
I thought it was Saoirse Ronan.
It's not Sasha. She's Irish.
Yeah, but how they spell it and how it's said is two distinct and completely different
ideas. I just need you to know that you're wrong. I'm sorry. If it comes to pronunciation, it's definitely I think it's Saoirse. I'm really sorry if I'm butchering it.
No. I'm gonna make sure it's wrong, and then I'm gonna send her a personal email.
Yeah, all right. I would actually be so embarrassed. She's so cool. Anyway, so she plays one of the main characters, and something to note, she is actually the same age as the character she plays when she plays it.
Interesting.
Which is rare when and you'll see why. It's kind of, they almost thought it was a bit too much. But Is
she quite young?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she was 14.
Okay.
14, 15 maybe? Okay, yeah.
And just for those of us who are face blind and know names that really struggle to put actresses and actors in places, where would I know Saoirse Ronan from?
If you say Saoirse Ronan one more time, I'm going to come over there. The other end of the couch. is not a safe place if you're going to mispronounce Miss Ronan's name one more time.
Yeah, okay. But
so here's the thing. I don't think we've actually seen her in a lot of things. Her filmography is all my to be watched list. So
yeah, okay.
We have seen her in the Grand Budapest Hotel. She plays the baker.
Yep. Because I vaguely remember that it was a film that we'd done in our podcast that you said, I want to see more of this person's films.
Correct.
So
here we are. We're starting to fill out our Saoirse Ronan filmography one by one.
Cool.
Lady Bird's probably up next. We have Saoirse Ronan. We also have Stanley Tucci, the Tooch.
I do know the name, the Tooch.
Oh.
He's got that face, doesn't he?
Sure. I don't, with you and your face blindness, I don't know how that tracks, but yes, he does have a face, correct. He's bald.
Yeah.
He has glasses. He's great. I've seen Stanley Tucci in a handful of things like Easy A, Devil Wears Prada. He's great. And he seems out of like movies in real life. He seems like a sweetheart.
Yeah.
So he's got good energy, but celebrities, it's hard, whatever he seems like is nice.
Yeah.
Then we also have Mark Wahlberg.
Marky Mark.
We have Rachel Weisz, who, if you don't remember, plays the main female lead in The Mummy.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. Gosh, this would be good. It's a pretty good film.
And then we also have Susan Sarandon.
I know the name Susan Sarandon just because it's such an interesting name. I can't picture her.
I'm actually trying to think of what she's in too, because again, I agree with you.
Like, I feel like I know the name Susan Sarandon from the pop culture references that other shows make about the name Susan Sarandon. Do you know what I mean? Like,
she's the main female lead in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh.
Obviously, that's her younger.
Yeah.
Much younger, but still.
As in Janet.
Correct.
Huh.
So obviously this is, 40 years later?
Interesting.
Yeah. Not quite 40, but you know what I mean. A long time later.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the top billing, I would say, from what I could gather.
It's a very interesting storied cast.
Pretty established. The least established person in this is, I guess, Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah, I mean,
she's
at this
the youngest.
stage. Yeah.
We have, the budget was about 65 mil. It box officed 93.6. Okay. So not a failure, but not like...
Not nothing right.
It didn't like crack any things. It had like mixed reviews.
Nominations, Oscars?
No like big wins from the Oscars. I think Stanley Tucci was nominated for Best Supporting.
Good on him.
But I don't think he won.
Yeah.
It had like mixed reviews from critics basically. So they really liked Saoirse Ronan and Stanley Tucci's performances.
Yeah.
And they thought that Peter Jackson did a good job, but they basically had problems with the story.
Oh, yeah?
Because it is a book-to-movie adaptation. Now, I haven't read the book, so I can't give any feedback on how accurate it was, but people basically thought it was maybe a little... I mean, we can talk more about what people thought afterwards, because I don't want to give you too many preconceptions.
But they thought the story was no good because the book was better, or they thought the story was no good because it was rambling and made no sense in the film?
I think two things. They thought it was too different from the book.
That's a crappy thing to hate on a film for. Or
maybe not. Yeah, like the changes weren't a positive change, or like, I don't know if it was necessarily plot changes, but more like vibe change.
Yeah.
And then I think also just the general, the content and how it's handled, I think people had trouble with, which I'm intrigued to see for myself.
Yeah.
Now, on that note, my last thing that I have in my little preamble is that the British Board of Film Classification, or the BBFC, reported that 24 objections were made to the rating of The Lovely Bones, more than any other movie in that year.
What was it rated as?
I think it was rated PG.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And I think that was intentional. I was reading sort of through it, and there was a couple of things they shot a few times to get them right, but when they wanted to make it gritty but still remain in the PG scheme of things. So I think it was a bit... Yeah, they towed a line, let's say, is what I'm gathering.
24 objections on PG probably is fair enough, because if you're going to watch a film and you're like, oh, the lead is a young woman and... It's called The Lovely Bones, but it's a PG film. Maybe it's appropriate to take kids to, parental guidance advised, and it scared the living daylights out of them. Yeah. Then, yeah, that probably would get some objections.
For sure. So I guess I'm interested to see about that as well, how I think that line was towed. Because I know, like I said, I know a lot about the plot So I know what the content is, and so I'm interested to see how they manage to make it PG, and also, but that I think is also part of the mixed reviews.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of like, so you're trying to take serious stuff and making it PG. You're straddling a line and you're not committing to either side.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe.
So it's like the content lost out because they tried to make it PG. It could have been a better film if they didn't worry about the rating.
Potentially. Yeah. I guess that's what we are here to decide.
Well, without further ado, let's get amongst it.
We meet Salmon, first name Susie, 14 years old and a budding photographer. Returning home from school, Susie is targeted by her neighbour, Mr. Harvey, who lures her into his makeshift hideout beneath the cornfield. Escaping his treacherous intent, Susie runs home, only to find herself separate from the reality of her parents and realises she was murdered by Harvey and now resides in limbo. Watching her family from the beyond, Susie sees her father grow increasingly obsessed with her disappearance, which drives a wedge between him and Susie's mother, who leaves for California. Exploring a confusing and fantastical afterlife, Susie discovers that Mr. Harvey has killed before, with 6 other girls dead by his hand, her own body hidden in a safe in his basement. Growing increasingly suspicious of his neighbour, Susie's father Jack tries to confront Mr. Harvey, but instead is assaulted by a teen in a cornfield. Younger sister Lindsay successfully breaks in though, and finds evidence that Harvey is involved in Susie's demise. But one step ahead, Mr. Harvey is on the run, with the safe of evidence dumped at a soon-to-be-filled-in sinkhole. Susie transitions to heaven, seeing her family finally find some happiness in the time after her demise. Harvey falls victim to a freak icicle accident, killing him and ending his horrific acts once and for all. Here's some deeper thoughts on the matter.
If there was a movie genre that was just really, really sad, this would be it. This would be that film.
Yeah.
I think I was like just slowly crying for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, there was I don't think I actually shed a tear fully. I did a few sobbing breaths.
Oh, oof.
But that was, it helps that I knew what was coming.
Yeah, look.
So I knew kind of the whole bare bones of the plot.
What? The bare bones? The lovely bones of the plot? Anyway.
This is a sad movie, and I guess something to note up the top for me, right, is that a fairly large portion of this movie involves Susie being in this kind of liminal space before she goes to heaven.
Yeah.
Which is presented as this, very heaven-like place, beautiful and happy and free, and her spirit will be
otherworldly, yeah.
Now, I can see how someone else who perhaps has a belief in a heaven would find that to be a comforting way for that character to be.
Yeah.
And therefore they don't find the whole movie
abjectly terrifying.
Depressing and terrifying.
Yeah.
Whereas I personally don't really have any belief in a heaven, at least not solid enough for it to give me any comfort.
Especially not one that has superliminal dimensional troubles.
Yeah.
Because that's terrifying.
So for me, it's just, like you said, abject terror and very, very sad.
I know that she has Holly Golightly as a friend, which, by the way, what funny timing.
What are the chances?
What outrageous odds that this character calls themselves Holly Golightly after we just watched that film 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So she's not alone, but also so much of it...
She doesn't just have her. She has a whole posse of murdered girls.
Oh, yeah. It's rough.
It is.
I am interested to know whether or not this killer that Stanley Tucci plays is based on a real killer.
I didn't see anything in the wiki.
Yeah.
There probably is.
Yeah, it's probably
There was enough serial killers in the 70s and 80s to go around, and plenty of them liked killing girls, so...
Take your pick, I guess. It's very believable. First of all, the story overall, the plot overall is upsettingly believable.
Yeah.
Everything every character does, every decision, every
behavior,
trope and behavior and reaction is just heartbreakingly relatable and believable. And Mark Wahlberg does a great job of this, guy who's holding it together, but he's holding it together with some real unhealthy behaviors.
Right.
And I didn't know where this film was going. And that really had me on the hook. There was one point where the film cuts to black at the screen, a candle goes out. And I'm like, we've been watching this long enough that could be the end. And if it is the end, I'm going to scream. I'm going to scream. Fortunately, it was not the end.
No. I did feel personally, and again, I guess I need to preface this by saying I haven't read the book, so I don't know how much the timing and pacing of this movie is true to the book or not. You know, how much of the book did they include? Did they cut a bunch? Could they have cut more? Because it felt like it was long. It's a 2 hour and 10-minute film or something.
Yeah, it felt long. Like I said,
it felt pretty long.
That cut to black I thought was the natural ending of the film in terms of timeline.
Yeah.
And it went for another 20 or 30 minutes, I feel like. So, yeah, I agree with you. It felt probably a little bit long. Certainly some of those, the blue, what do they call it? The blue space between heaven and reality or something?
I don't know. They have a few different names. But yeah, they definitely had a lot of liminal space, pre-heaven moments.
Yeah, and some of it, like, I appreciated that some of it had hints to the truth that, I can't remember, Stanley Tucci's character is like the murderer, and she often refers to him as my murderer.
Mr. Harvey.
Mr. Harvey, thank you.
I think, yep.
So Mr. Harvey obviously has a slew of victims that we don't know about.
Right.
For the first, like...
2/3.
You have to assume that this is not his first rodeo, maybe.
Sure.
But you don't know exactly how bad it is. And the going through that door and Susie says, if I go through that door, I'll never be able to turn back. And we think, it's like it's a moving on thing, but it's a knowledge thing.
Right.
Once she goes through the door, she knows about all these other victims.
And probably comes to terms with the fact that the way she was murdered.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
You know?
When you see then all these other victims, you actually start to see in the liminal space where she had been living, all these hints of the other victims that had come before her, like the sun hat throwing through the tree and the flowers and the large coloured ball and a few other of those items was like they'd all left their mark on this place.
Yeah.
Whew.
So I wanted to touch quickly on something we talked about in the preamble, which is that this had mixed reviews from critics.
I kind of see why. So
the critics basically said Saoirse Ronan and Stanley Tucci, great job.
Good job.
And I agree.
Yep.
They both did a really good job. Especially Saoirse Ronan was only 14 in that film. Yep. And she did a great job.
Yep.
She, in fact, there was a little bit, according to Wikipedia, again, her parents weren't sure whether it was appropriate to have a 14-year-old play such a heavy role.
Yep.
But after meeting with Peter Jackson, they decided to go ahead with it. And I guess if your daughter's an actress and Peter Jackson wants to put her in a film, as long as you decide. I mean, and again, this goes back to something else I want to talk about, which is a little bit of the sanitization of the film potentially. Yeah. Now, again, I can't say how much of that is true because I haven't read the book, so I don't know whether the book is actually quite PG or not. But the fact that they were so determined to make this a PG film, and from what I read, it was accessible, it was seen by more people, which kind of makes sense. But also, I feel like you're cheapening the subject matter.
I don't know, man. I don't think that's a fair statement. I don't think it's fair that they're cheapening the subject matter because it's not. These things don't happen to M15 plus people. They don't happen to R18 plus people. They happen to everyone, right? Like,
sure.
Like maybe not as often now as they did in the 60s and 70s.
No, but the topic of being murdered is not for children, I guess, is the point.
Yeah.
Even though it happens to children. That's a shame. That's a problem.
That's a crying shame.
But it doesn't mean that Bluey shouldn't have a murder episode just because children get murdered.
I'll write that down. That's a great idea.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's not...
No, I know what you're saying. Like, I'm not saying it's for children. PG is not for children. No, PG is for teens.
But it's usually PG-13.
Yes.
And under.
No.
Okay. Question, is PG and PG-13 two different things?
Yes.
See, that's the thing.
In Australia it is. I don't know if it's in the UK.
I don't really know exactly. But, I mean, look, there was complaints and I get why.
Yeah, there were a few scenes. Tucci's spectacular CGI death scene.
I think, I read that they did that. I don't know if they, made it more intense or what they did, but it was definitely from what I read on the wiki, they wanted to make it satisfying for the watcher because you want that payoff.
You want some sort of closure.
I don't think it's that good of a payoff because he just has a quick death, and that to me is not, as someone who doesn't believe in the death penalty, because I don't think I think if you're a horrible person, you should live with your crime.
The satisfaction, forever. I think, is not meant to come from the fact that he had a quick death or that he died.
It's that his reign of terror is over.
The implication is that she had a hand in it.
I guess that's true.
Because there were icicles in her.
No, that is true, and there was some magic. Yeah. No, I guess, but that it's all implied.
Yeah, it's heavily implied. But when you're dealing with a supernatural film that is also touching on life after death or some sort of spiritual afterlife that has control of elements of the physical world that, you know, what is and what isn't. Like, it is like, he's obviously much older, right? Like it looks like it's the 90s. He's still driving his...
You reckon he's that much older?
He looks heaps older, yeah.
I don't know. He kind of has just like skeevy look from the start, so it's hard to tell.
Skeevy look from the start, but he is like a man in his, I would say, like his 40s. Like
when it starts.
So it's like, when did she say she was murdered? Like 71 or 73 or something? And he looks like he's in his 40s. In that last bit, he looks like he's in his 60s.
I disagree.
I got the vibe that 20 years had passed. The other clue to that is the girl that he accosts looks like a grunge punk.
Maybe
90s or late 80s girl.
I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I didn't really get that vibe. I didn't think he looked that different.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's kind of up for debate. I think, here's the thing, right? I think it's less satisfying if it's been 20 years because then he's probably killed 5 more people.
Oh, yeah.
And the satisfying thing would be that she is his last victim and she magically helps kill him through icicle from the beyond. You know what I mean? Like that's the more satisfying ending. I mean, this film is just tough, to be honest. Like, it is depressing.
There is not a lot of payoff. This is not a film where there's a bad guy and they get caught and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
This is a lot of emotional turmoil.
There's justice.
There's no justice. And it's not that there's no justice because the machinations of the system are corrupt and that's exploited in the film.
No.
There's just, everything is meaningless and hopeless and there's no justice. And that's
not
why...
a film to watch if you're already feeling a little blue, I'd say.
That is why I said the genre of this film is not supernatural horror. It's not
even horror. It's definitely, if it's anything, it's thriller.
Yeah, it is a psychological... There are horror elements, though.
Like what?
So
that aren't thriller.
Yeah, I think this is what a PG horror looks like.
I guess I just don't even know if horror can be PG in my head, except for like something like Monster House. But that's like, you know what I mean?
Also, the horror elements are where it's different from thriller. Thriller and horror, and especially like PG horror like this, have a lot of crossover. I think the horror element is that there is a lot of creeping dread around Stanley Tucci's character.
Yeah.
So like there are silhouette shots of him where you cannot see his face. It's just black. Like the cinematography on him.
Him in the cornfield.
Outstanding. Him in the cornfield. Shots of him in the doorway, looking back.
I can see why he got nominated.
Outstanding. And also like the direction and shots of him superb. That scene in the house with Lindsay, she's upstairs and rifling through the house, and we know he's probably going to come back. We know he's probably planned for this because he's such a planner, such a waiter. She's
already in his sights. I mean, not that it would matter who was in his house, but still, it's like extra.
Yeah, well, honestly, I
thought he was laying a trap.
I genuinely thought he was laying a trap because he knew that she runs past his house.
I don't think he was, though, given his reaction, because I think he just had, you know, because he lives in an old creaky and creepy 70s house.
Yeah.
So he just, you know, had like a bit of a sense of it. God, that was a good scene. That was a very well
that's what I'm saying.
Scene.
Thriller and horror have a bit of crossover when it's creeping dread.
Yeah.
And that very much had more horror than thriller, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's debatable, I guess.
Yeah. And, you know.
Because we watch so much horror, it's hard for me to see this as horror rather than just thriller, but I mean, I get what you're saying.
Nothing on the Xenobites, for sure. But if we look at something that's like straight up thriller, I feel like the psychological stress induced here is more in line with what I would expect from like a creeping dread horror. We're staring at the face of a serial killer.
Yeah.
And we know it basically the entire film. And it gets revealed to us really the depths of this evil character. Ah, what a film. What a film. One
thing I found frustrating is that obviously there's a few different ways that you don't get payoff in this.
Yeah.
The biggest one being they never find her body.
Yep.
And the implication is that they never will because the sinkhole gets filled in.
Yep.
The second thing is that they don't even show when she brings the book back and she, you know, shows it to her grandma, but then they cut and they switch to just like the police being there, and the implication is they're going to try and find it, but he gets away. They don't I think it would have been nice to show like the family at least coming to terms with like, there's a little bit of closure in having found the book with her hair in it, because there's a pretty strong implication at that point, right? Yeah. As before, where it's like, well, she's missing and there was blood and there's a hat, but nothing else. you could still, theoretically, she could still be taken, which is worse, right? I think that's generally agreed that it's worse to have someone abducted, for a long, long time.
And they might die, or they might be dead, or they might be dead years from now. You just don't know.
And the unknown is worse than the closure.
Yeah. So getting the closure. And maybe they did show us that, because obviously...
They didn't.
Well, no, not in such an overt way.
We see them later.
Yeah. So later on in life... it's like there's a shot of Lindsay, I think it was Lindsay pregnant, and then the parents
are happy again, or at least together.
Trying to make it work, right? So it's like, we kind of get a glimpse of the fact that maybe the closure of this has happened. In the denouement, there was in
the what, hey?
Like the ending of the story, where we're getting the wrap up from...
What are you using fucking college level 3 words on me? What's going on?
At the ending of the story, when they're wrapping it up.
So 2 syllables max thing.
More crayons, please. In the denouement, I did not understand why, when Susie was talking about how the lovely bones formed around her life.
Right.
I didn't get that bit. I don't know if I didn't hear all the words.
I think the sort of sentiment behind the phrase "the lovely bones" and the way she describes it is that life kind of continued after her death. And that good things still happened after her death. So, for example, Lindsay having a partner and getting pregnant, and her parents still being together and making it work. So it's just kind of like, imagine a pile of bones and then flowers growing up in between them. Like, sad, like they lost her, but they're not letting the bones ruin and rot and ruin their lives forever. There's loveliness and growth that happens around them.
Is that a phrase, like the lovely bones? I don't know. Yeah.
But that's what I took from that. That's what made, there is basically goodness after the horribleness of her death.
So for that context, this whole time, the reason I expected them to find the body is I thought that she was sort of acting on her influence in the world to try and prevent Stanley Tucci's character from doing more murders.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's because her bones were kept in his house. She was like a force of good.
Right.
Counteracting him.
As opposed to the other bodies, which were scattered around.
Yeah, scattered or found, right? Because it said in many of the cases that they had been found where she hadn't been. So she was sort of tethered to this world in his house as a way to counteract him. So I thought the lovely bones was going to be like a supernatural literal, a la The Sixth Sense.
Sure.
Where the name of the movie is about the thing quite literally.
Yeah. But
when it was actually about a conceptual thing that's just dropped on me in the last 30 seconds of the film.
Bit of a rug pull.
Yeah, a bit of a rug pull, bit of an upset.
Yeah,
they had us in the first half, I'm not going to lie.
Again, this is kind of going back to what I said at the start, where I just don't think I'm going to take any kind of comfort from this that other people might.
Look, I don't even know where to start with this film. It was heavy. It was really heavy.
Yes, it was. I can understand why Stanley Tucci got nominated, because holy damn.
Yes.
He did a great job at being a horrific character.
And as you are wont to say, being the villain is often so much harder than playing the hero or any other role.
Correct.
And yeah, I mean, it's really funny at the start of this, before we watched the film, you were saying how much Stanley Tucci is such a lovely guy, such a lovely character.
Yep.
And we are just watching the face of evil, the face of complete evil in this film.
I know, it's like the idea that he has to play this sleazy, greasy killer of girls, young girls.
Yeah.
Horrible. Just, I'm sure, I hope Stanley Tucci got some good therapy. Because, I feel like you'd need it.
Yeah. God damn.
Saoirse Ronan did a good job as well, although her role was a bit different than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Because I knew most of the plot of this movie, at least the key points. What I didn't really know was how much her role was based on her traversing this liminal space to go to heaven. I didn't know that was sort of so much of it. I knew that she was sort of watching the real world.
Yeah.
And trying to communicate and, get justice for herself in a sense.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize so much of it was going to revolve around this moving on to heaven story, I
did find it somewhat frustrating that she comes back and possesses the dark-haired weird girl.
Mm-hmm. Kind of rude.
And
kisses her man.
And kisses her man.
And that he's like okay with it. Like he's like, this is totally normal. My girlfriend just fainted. Now she's a girl that disappeared a couple of years ago.
Who I had a crush on.
I had a crush on.
But that was 2 years ago when I was like 16 and she was 14. Now I'm like 18 and she's still 14.
And we're just going to have a quick kiss and then she can move on. And that's totally normal because I've done this with ghosts before.
It's just the life of being a poet, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, maybe there's an implication that didn't really happen, right?
None of this really happened.
Okay.
Do you mean in the book, though?
Or like it's just Susie's spirit making it up. I don't know. Like it's a little bit hard to justify that actually happening.
To put that into the realm of perception, when her father is looking at the rose, it becomes alive, but he drops the rose, it's dead.
Right.
What he is perceiving is not actually what's happening.
No, obviously. But I think his reaction is kind of odd if he's genuinely seeing... Because, like, okay, hear me out. It's one thing for her father to hallucinate a rose blooming or whatever, the flower.
Yep.
Still, obviously, like, hallucinatory, weird vibes, but he's going through it mentally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's another thing for old mate poet to see his girlfriend faint, be like comforting her, and then suddenly she's a girl that disappeared 2 years ago asking you to kiss her.
Yeah.
And instead of being like, whoa, what's going on? I'm having a crisis of mental health. It's like, sure, I'll kiss you. You're really beautiful. It's a little odd, and it's a little, there's something. It's
harder to like grasp that straw.
For sure. And it gives a little bit like sanitized something or other. I don't know. Like everyone's just A-okay with seeing, like her reaction, the girl, weird girl, who has this unexplained sort of connection to ghosts, right? Because she sees her like multiple times.
Yeah.
Her reaction, much more believable, of being like shook and a bit creeped out and fainting when a ghost rushes her.
Yeah, I don't think she fainted because the ghost rushed her. I think she
got possessed.
She was possessed by Susie.
But, well, I guess what I'm saying is though, like she has a much more like
believable. Whereas old mate ghost poet, he just wants to kiss anything with lips. Apparently,
yeah. He's like, this will make a great sonnet.
What a hussy.
Anyway, let's stop crapping on him.
Look, it's hard not to because if he hadn't been there, I fully expected Susie to reach out to, I do not know the girl's name with the dark hair. She gets given a name right near the start and it isn't really mentioned a whole lot. It's like Laura
doing my research.
Lara or something. Either way, I was like, my body is in the safe, do something about it, please. You know?
Ruth.
I was miles off. I don't know. I know that's probably what happens in the book. Maybe that's it. Maybe in the book she comes and gives a cheeky little ghost message to Ruth. And Ruth, intervenes and there's some kind of body closure. I don't know.
I think ultimately this film would bring comfort to some people, but not to all. And I'm not very comforted by this. I'm just glad that people aren't killed with quite so much.
You're glad that DNA evidence exists.
Correct.
You're glad that luminol exists.
I'm glad that people don't just say, is Susie meant to be home? Yeah. No, she probably just went to the mall and isn't home for several hours.
I mean, at that point, I don't think it would have made much of a difference. No, I know.
I'm just saying, like, the whole, like, latchkey kid kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so... it's just a really tough topic to consider. As someone who has a kind of on and off interest in true crime content, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's definitely not my go-to because it's heavy.
Yep.
And not all of it is done tastefully.
No, and also not all of it is wrapped up, and like we sort of said, the not knowing
is tough.
But
so as someone that has sort of dipped a limb in and out of those
several
pools,
limbs. Stay sexy.
I struggle to enjoy something so unsatisfying. I thought it was a beautifully made film in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a lot to like about this creatively.
Right. But it is pretty depressing.
Oh yeah, the subject material.
But again, I don't think every film should be designed to be purely sunshine, roses, uplifting.
No.
There is a reality to this film that's just upsetting.
Yep. And I think, like you said,
that's kind of well done in its own way.
That afterlife comfort that we're meant to get, that's meant to counter, because that is not something that resonates with our beliefs necessarily. That we go, oh, well, this is the fantasy made up bit, and here is the horror film that we're watching. Oh, and look, some more rainbows and sunshine and Fantasyland made up bit, which in itself kind of terrifying because she's trapped there and alone.
Yeah.
And has no control or influence.
With the corpses of all the other girls.
Yeah. It's, you know.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. I mean, look, there are places on the internet that mark this as fantasy horror. So
yep.
I think it is more of a thriller, supernatural drama, which is, that to me rings more true.
Yep.
But my goodness.
I can definitely see why people don't necessarily agree whether it was supernatural or fantasy or, you know, thriller or horror or psychological. Like,
right.
It definitely doesn't
it dances across a few different genres.
Yeah. What's in a name? My Capulet.
A rose by any other name. So I think it's probably time we rate this. What do you think?
I'm just so overwhelmed by being emotionally tortured for 2 hours and a bit that I'm sure I haven't talked about any of the film at all because I just haven't really found words.
Sometimes we don't really talk about the film. We just yap.
Yap.
That's why you guys love us, right?
Okay, well, before we rate it, what was your favourite moment?
Oof. Hard to pick a favourite moment.
Moment stood out to you then?
There was so many almost moments of satisfaction. I so wanted Mark Wahlberg to kick his butt.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he doesn't get to is real upsetting. And then he gets beat up himself in the cornfield.
Yeah, yep. And the implication is that
old mate lured him in there.
Yeah, it was intentional. It was a you know, he hunts ducks. It's about patience and not being seen. Ugh.
So I think the only part that I really thought was like really satisfying is Lindsay finally getting the evidence.
Yes. Yeah.
Not that it led to anything, but I was really like, that's a really like go girl moment of like, yeah, you believe, you have this like suspicion about your sister's killer or whatever.
And you rolled the dice and rolled well on some perception checks. You rolled a lot of dice, dude. That was
you made a great saving throw on the athletics check to get up at the end and run away from him.
Oh, yeah.
And they set her up to be athletic. You know what I mean? Like there's good signposting that she's, you know, capable to do this.
There is not much worse when you're in a horror film and you see somebody do something that, like, I couldn't do that. Right. I couldn't fall from a, like, second story window and then just get up and run. But also, I'm not 17 and on the athletics track team, so...
Right. And don't have the adrenaline of running away from your sister's murderer pumping through you.
Yeah.
There's a few different things at play there.
Couple of additions.
I guess that might be my favorite part, because the rest of the movie's pretty bleak, and there's not much, like the rest of it's just so upsetting. That's like the only win.
Yeah. Well, so for me,
if
I had to pick like a favorite part, I see what you're going for, and this is like the win. This feels uplifting in a way. What I really enjoyed in the film was the family dynamic. And I really, one part that I think was quite a standout was when the grandma comes and there's a bit of a montage of the grandma.
That's true. She's the comedy relief for like 30 seconds in the film. Good old Susan Sarandon.
Drinking, smoking, setting fire to things. Like this is I think what you said is if we were babysitting, like live in uncle and auntie, this is how it would be.
That's the vibe, yeah.
We're doing our best.
The vibes we bring to the function is Susan Sarandon in this film.
The Susan Sarandon of it all. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm going to be thinking about this film for a while, I think.
As you should.
All right. Rating it's going to be tricky. What are we rating it against? Did I enjoy it? It was a good film, but did I enjoy it?
I'll go first to give you some thinking room. I did enjoy this film. But I guess and this is a very like personal, like all of our ratings come from a personal place of like what do I enjoy and what takes away or adds to a film for me. And so caveat, I think I'm going to give this film 7 knitted beanies out of 10.
Oof. Yeah, those beanies were pretty hand knitted.
Because it was good. I enjoyed it. I thought the filmmaking itself was good. The kind of heaven-based plotline didn't land for me. And a lot of the like imagery that they focus in on with that just was a little bit like filler.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas I wanted to get back to the real life, grounded, gritty, serial killer, getting away with it plotline.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed it. You know, I think the acting was phenomenal and a lot of the actual visuals were really good. You know, the dreary nature of a lot of the shots were really well done, and creeping dread and everything.
Yep. Yeah, a lot to like there. So I'm on the fence about this. I want to rate it higher, but I'm going to dock some points for it. So I'm going to go in at 7.9 detectives with a hunch out of 10.
Did he have a hunch though?
He had a hunch that she ran away, and then there was blood, and then he had a hunch that she was just dead, and that's as good as we're going to get in this town.
Yikes!
I want to rate it higher because I really artistically enjoyed. Like, you could tell that there was a powerhouse of creative minds
Peter Jackson
put this together, right? Exactly, and I think you said Spielberg was in on the team.
He was an executive producer, I think.
So there is a lot in this where you go, wow, this is impressive. This is not just well put together, but it's very imaginative and creative, and in that way it is enjoyable to watch. But then in the same vein, some of those scenes went on just a little bit too long, and we kept revisiting those same kind of ideas.
Right.
And I guess on one hand, they're trying to tell a story about how time is different.
She's living in this limbo-like state. I see what you're saying, though.
It's so like they're trying to get that message across, and that nearly hit. It nearly hit.
It's not going to hit as hard for us, though.
Honestly, I didn't mind that, because even if it's not a specific faith or a specific religion or any of that, it's what she believes in. Maybe. Do you know what I mean?
Fair.
Like, it's her personal idea of I'm 14 and there's this.
This is my personal afterlife. Yeah.
And she sort of says that her neighbor had a daughter who dies of leukemia in a few years, but she never sees her in her heaven.
Right.
The implication that
everyone has their own.
Right. There is this. It is very personal, and none of it. So like, I was pretty fine with that as a concept of whatever this state that she's existing in is completely solipsistic, and none of that matters. And the storytelling that is going on with film, I thought was really impressive. And the ideas, the creativity of what they actually put on that screen, with those like mountains moving and waterfalls from mountaintops and the giant ball and crashing of the bottles, some of that stuff was out of this world. And it's very hard to do surrealism on film. And I thought that was very impressive.
Yeah, there was definitely some cool imagery.
I want to rate it higher because of that, but that in and of itself isn't like, when I like, did I enjoy the film? At the end of the day, if I like just put it on the shelf between 0 and 10 with other films that I enjoyed, I was gripping the edge of this couch. I just kept sitting up straighter, but it was a little bit too long.
Yeah, I think ultimately the difference in our scores can probably be attributed to I knew what the story was.
Yes.
So I'm not here experiencing it fresh with unknowing in my heart.
Yeah.
Whereas you were.
Certainly not knowing the story, and then kept me guessing right up until the end, where I was like, nah, they're going to find the body and her magic bones are going to come and sort this out.
Magic bone.
So yeah, that had me going. So 7.9, and that's take it or leave it. It was a good film.
Take it or leave it. Well, I think that'll do us on this episode of the Better Late Than Never Club. We are both pretty drained, I think, from watching that film. It is not for the weak of heart, not in a scary way, but in an emotional...
It is very draining.
Intense way.
Don't watch this if you want to have a good time.
Emotionally.
Sure.
Thank you for your ears listening. Let us know if there are other films, your favorites maybe, or your least favorites that you love to hate, or something along those lines that you want us to watch and give our thoughts on. As you can tell, we are highly cerebral beings who use terms such as denouement.
I'll put that on a shirt.
And thank you so much for listening. Till next time.
Till next time.
This episode of the Better Late Than Never Club is brought to you by our patrons: Alex, Christopher, Lindy, Matthew, Nathan, and Rachel.
And also our members: Aimless, Andrew, Raina, Salty Pond, and Simon.
Thank you for listening.